All right. We also hired you for a consultation that we did, or an audit that we did for Ollie's channel. I run Creator Smarts together with Ollie. His YouTube channel took off a few months ago, and we said, okay, again, we're gonna double down. We're gonna double down on what's working. So let's get in somebody who understands YouTube, and we did this audit. Maybe we can just share some of the advice that you gave there, because it was actually some really good advice, and Ollie already started making some changes on his channel, and we are seeing the results directly of that. So I remember that one thing that you said is, so Ollie has an educational channel, right? Talks about language learning, cover all kind of languages, but every time he would do a video on a specific language, like Italian, for example, that video would not get as many views as the 5 hardest languages to learn for English learners. So very wide topics, very general topics. How do you think about creating content that is for a very specific avatar versus creating content for a very wide audience?
Yeah, so in general, YouTube favors channels that have a very specific audience, and that specific audience can be by definition a broad audience. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like super niche down into one language, for example, but it's like, if you're going to be niche down into one language, just do that language. And if you're going to be broad, just do broad. Because what happens is, if like you said there, like if you're doing kind of broad videos on like how to learn a language quickly or whatever, like, and that does well, and then you do 20 books you should read in Italian. Think about, like, so many people who watch the broad language video might have no interest in Italian. Like, if they're not learning Italian, why would you watch that video? So then you're just in this constant state of splitting your audience and creating almost separate audiences on the same channel. And some people think that's okay. They think, okay, well, I can just make videos for this people and these people and this people. But YouTube's algorithm will still serve the videos to your regular viewers, and it becomes very hard to build up regular viewers, because they're just like, I only like 1 out of 4 videos that this channel creates. It's like, the way I like to think about it is, if, let's say, if 100% of people like this video and watch this video, how can our next video have over 80% interest to that audience again? So how can 80% of the people who watch this video still be interested in this video, and so on and so on? So that doesn't mean you have to just make the same video every single time. You can still experiment, but there has to be like a theme. There has to be a format. So yeah, that was the big advice for you guys. I think long term you'll really see results from doing that, because it just takes you out of this limbo phase of like, we're getting some momentum on the channel, and then you make, let's say, a video on Italian books, and you take a nosedive, and then you have to kind of work back up the momentum. Whereas if you just have this like straight trajectory of every video is focused around one language, or every video is focused around just broad advice, or like maybe just the very biggest languages or whatever, instead of going really niche on the language, it just becomes much easier to build up momentum.
Yeah. So I have a friend who helps people relocate to another country. Now, let's say this is not what he does, but just going to give you an example here. So let's say I have a YouTube channel for Dutch people who want to move to Belgium, right? I live in Belgium. Would you, and keep in mind that there is an underlying business, right? So the YouTube is my audience. That's how I'm going to get exposure. And then the underlying service is, I don't know, it could be a consultation service. Would you create videos, like very specific videos about, for example, 5 mistakes that Dutch people make when they move to Belgium? Or would you do like very broad videos where you, for example, do street interviews where you interview Belgian people and you ask how they think? So the title of the video could be something like how Belgian people think about Dutch people, right? So these are 2 ideas that both more or less for the same avatar, but one is very wide and the other one is very specific. Would you do a combination of the 2 or go for the broader one? How would you go about that?
Yeah, so I love this question because it brings up a really important kind of caveat to the last point. So YouTube, the way of YouTube is there are browse and suggested channels. So like recommendation channels where they get the majority of their views from recommendations from YouTube. Like they're making content that's very focused on one audience, and YouTube just push that to the same audience and to lookalike audiences that resemble the same audience or share the same interests. And then there's a search-based channel. Now, search-based channels have to think less about kind of making really specific videos to one category. They can be more kind of just like throwing lots of stuff at the fan, like just like this. Like, we're going to make this video on this topic, this video on that topic, because they don't have, like, a search channel by design doesn't necessarily have a loyal audience. So if the channel's on something like relocating countries, I'm guessing that a lot of the actual educational information there is probably something that people would watch just when they're planning the move. Like, they're not going to move and then be like, I'm still going to watch this channel. Mm-hmm. So by definition, I feel like that is a channel that would suit search very well. It's very different to the language based channel, because sure, you guys and Ollie, like, you were getting some views from search, but a lot of your traffic was coming from recommendations, and that's why for me I was like, okay, there's a chance for us to get a lot of promotion in a recommendation audience. Let's double down on the content that's working, and let's eliminate these like more search focused, more specific to language focused videos. But the difference is, like, a channel on relocation, I don't feel, just by design, I don't feel like that's ever going to be a channel that, you know, does that well in browse and suggested, because it's not the sort of content you want to be recommended. It's the sort of content you want to look up at a specific time.
Okay. And
there's a big difference. It's like, no one, like, Mr. Beast has great success with like videos about like last to leave the circle wins 100k. No one searches that. Like, no one's going like last to leave circle, I really want to see that video. But it's interest based, and it's all about recommendations and suggested traffic. Whereas it's funny, because I've been thinking about relocating country for a long time as well. Yeah. And I've been watching a channel for Irish people moving to Portugal. And like, those videos, when I want to watch them, I go search them up. I don't expect to be recommended them in the middle of the day, because it's a specific time I want to actually look at them. So for a channel like that, I would actually focus more on search terms. You know, the most commonly searched things around that topic, whether it's on Google Trends or you see it in the YouTube search bar, what people are actually looking for. I guess it's stuff like how to relocate, how to set up your visa, how to set up your tax when you move to Belgium or whatever. Like, I would focus heavily on stuff like that, because you're never going to have a loyal audience there. And I don't think you need a loyal audience, because the way that YouTube channel would work and serve the business is, you know, you rank on search, people watch the video, they find it helpful, and then you have a consulting service that they can book in the bio.
I guess it's always important to keep in mind what the business really is, right? So if somebody like Mr. Beast, it's getting views. That's the business. And of course he has the Mr. Beast burger and all these, and the apps and the promotions and God knows what else. But in case, you know, of the relocation business, the business is the consultancy service. So then back to your channel, because in your channel, the videos that you create, it's an interesting case, because it's a combination, right? Your videos are for a very wide audience, but at the same time, you also attract the people that you want to work with. So what's is that in a combination of the two strategies? Or
I think, it's a good observation. I think the difference being is, if you want to grow on YouTube, that's a long-term thing. Whereas if you want to switch country, that's like a 3-month thing. I mean, I don't know how complex the situation is, but if you want to relocate countries, like what I'm doing at the moment, it's not really something, I don't think anyone's like really passionate. I mean, I'm sure your friend is, but I don't think anyone's really passionate about the idea of, like, you know, the paperwork and all that sort of stuff. Whereas people are actually really passionate about YouTube, and it's a much more long-term thing where people, you know, could sort of, like, I mean, there's creators who watch my channel who've been creators for 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think my one is a bit of a hybrid, where I make essentially viral video attempts in this niche, that bring in a wide audience, and a percentage of those work with my consulting. But if I focus my channel completely on search, and I had like a very specific service, let's say it's just about like a certain type of YouTube, or just about, even if it's just about monetization on YouTube, and I target search, I probably have better results there, because there is like a disadvantage to the broad audience. So, like, you know, if you see a channel, let's just say you see a YouTube advice channel that gets 10k views per video, and they're making, you know, let's say they're making $1 million a year on their consulting business, that doesn't mean that because I get 700k views a video, I'm making, what would that work out? It's 70 million a year or something.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't translate like that. The broad audience naturally means that there's a drop off in conversion rate because it just gets pushed out to people who will never have any intention working with you.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a hybrid approach. I just think it's very situational. I think if you're, a very broad, like YouTube's still a broad topic. Like my service, I know there's not that many people doing it, but it's still a very big industry. Like YouTube pay out billions to creators every year. It's like, there's like, I think I read a stat recently where there's like the equivalent of 400,000 full-time jobs on YouTube in the US alone, based on the GDP produced. So it's a huge industry, and that gives like a lot more scope to making broad viral content.
Yeah.
But like, going back to like relocating or even something like very specific, like a certain skill. Like I work with a channel before that does like auto repairs for a specific car. And sure, he might have some enthusiasts that tune in and watch every video, but quite often it's like, I need to change the supercharger on my Volvo S40. I'm going to search it, not just, get a recommendation at any given time. Because like, if that channel is trying to get recommendations, I mean, if their business is around that specific car and maybe making guides on that specific car, they really want to target people who want that advice in the moment, as opposed to kind of relying on YouTube to push it to the right people.
Yeah, cool. So maybe it really depends on your niche, right? So if you're teaching YouTube, there's millions and millions that are going around in the YouTube niche that you can do videos on very broad topics. But if you do something very specific, for example, Irish people moving to Portugal, then it's better to go for search.
Yeah, exactly. And there's channels, like one of the channels that I've been watching about that, I think he's got like probably like 10k, 20k subscribers, and like I will guarantee he's making a very good living through his consulting, because the people out of those 10k people that are watching, firstly, they're probably people who are either high net worth or have a business, so they have funds, whereas maybe a lot of people who watch my videos are just maybe people who are just complete beginners, people in different countries who maybe don't have as much cash reserves as people do over here, or in the Western world. And there's a lot of different variables, whereas he has high net worth, Irish and UK people looking to move to Portugal. If only a few percent of those people turn into clients of his, he can still build a very big business. And I actually think, like, on my videos, there's probably like 10 or 20,000 people that I get the most of my business from. So like, I don't want to say they're more valuable, because every view is valuable, but like sometimes I get like a few like less views on a video than normal. Maybe like I get 100k views instead of 700k views, but quite often those first 100k views is where most of the value is, because they're the people who know me and have watched me for a long time. And maybe the next 600,000 views on a video, it's great for the look and it's great for the ego, and it does bring in money and it does bring in new people, but the conversion rate just dramatically drops, and the amount of people who actually will turn into customers drops down. So it's a balance between, making content your existing audience likes and trying to attract new audience at the same time.
Yeah. Last question about this topic, and I know that we're geeking out a little bit on this, but I think it's
no problem.
I think it's important. If you were the Irish guy that advises Irish people to move to Portugal, would you still do broad videos like every now and then for discoverability, or wouldn't you bother?
I mean, it depends what a broad video looks like. So like your example is like interviewing people. Yeah,
street interviews. Like, what do Portuguese people think about Irish people? Because any Irish person would click on that, right?
Yeah, like that idea is a good idea. Like that's a good example. So I think there'd be no harm to mix that in, because the thing is, with a search audience, I'm much less, the way, like, from me working with the Ollie on that channel, I have this almost just obsession with not splitting the audience. But the minute that changes to a search-based audience, I care a lot less, because the punishment you get from the algorithm isn't as harsh, because there's plenty of examples of search-based channels. Like I work with a channel that does like 200 or 300 million views a month with movie clips, and they put up like 10 different movie clips from all these random movies in a row, and then 10 more. if you look at the channel, like I looked at the channel, I watch a lot of movies. I would say I watch, out of the last 100 videos they posted, I would have been interested in maybe 5 or 10% of the videos, because I've only watched like 5 or 10% of the actual movies they covered. But you'll see that they never really do that well on the first day, but then over time, just because they're ranking on search, people pick up the views, and that's where they get their 300 million views a month from. So it does depend a bit like on the content at hand, but in that case, I'm not too worried about making something too different from your regular content, because you're just not going to have that loyal of an audience anyway. So something like interviewing Portuguese people, asking Portuguese people what they think of Irish people, like technically that's attracting the right audience, because I guess it's Irish people who are interested in Portugal in some way. But the thing is, like, if you make something that's too broad and too like non-specific, it might get views, but the views are almost irrelevant because it's not going to bring in customers. So like if you just made a really broad video on like Portugal, or maybe just a really broad video and just, you know, like Irish people try Portuguese food, I mean, that might do well, but like, is it attracting the right audience? Maybe, but I would feel like if you made a video like that, it probably, you know, might be primarily Portuguese people watching it, which are the opposite of the people you want to attract.